Hello and welcome to the Air and Space Live Chat. I'm Marty Kelsey. I'm one of the hosts of STEM in 30, a TV show for middle school students produced by the National Air and Space Museum. And we have a great program for you today. Today is all about pilots. So if you have questions about pilots or piloting or how to become a pilot, put those down into the questions and into the comments section, and we will get to as many of them as we can today. Also, be sure to let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to give you a shout out during the program. Our guests today are Shaesta Waiz, the founder and president of Dreams Soar. She was the youngest woman to circumnavigate the globe in a single engine aircraft. We're also joined by Major Christopher Duckett, a U-2 pilot from the 99th Reconnaissance Squadron in the United States Air Force. Thank you both so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you, Marty.
Thank you.
All right, so Shasta, let's start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about your around the world flight?
Sure. So about 3 years ago, I took off from Daytona Beach, Florida in a Beechcraft Bonanza. It's single engine, usually a 6-seater aircraft that we modified. So it was me in the pilot seat. I had this really obnoxious 59-gallon fuel tank that sat next to me in the co-pilot seat, and then another large fuel tank that sat right behind me. And so I took off. The total trip, it was 145 days around the world, 30 stops, 22 countries across 5 continents. Initially, we had planned for 90 days, but because of weather and some interesting maintenance issues, I was delayed, and it went to 145 days. But I finished the flight on October 3rd of 2017. And when I did so, I became the youngest woman to circumnavigate the world in a single engine aircraft. But the whole purpose behind this global flight was not for me to go on this adventure around the world. It was really to stop at most of the countries, and our team, they organized outreach events where I would connect with kids all over the world and talk to them about careers in STEM and aviation. And throughout that time, I met with 3,000 kids face to face around the world. And since the completion of the flight, in total, we've reached over 12,000 kids worldwide.
That is awesome. Well, Chris, tell us a little bit about what it's like to fly the U-2 and what's the mission of the U-2?
Okay, well, first of all, the mission of the U-2 is high altitude reconnaissance. What that means is I fly high and I look and listen to bring strategic information to our national leaders or national decision makers. So the U-2, how it flies and how it is to operate it. So back in the 60s, more accurately the 50s, it was thought that if we could create an airplane to fly high enough, we could fly wherever we want and nothing could reach up and touch us. We were impervious to any type of adversary interaction. Well, 1960, that all changed. Most famous guy with the U-2 is Francis Gary Powers when he was downed over Russian airspace. So the idea is to fly high and look at as much as possible. To fly the U-2, it is a single-seat aircraft. We wear a full pressure suit similar to a spacesuit. Because of the pressures and the altitudes that we fly. The aircraft flies at 70,000 plus altitude. So we can see the curvature of the Earth, see some amazing sights when we're up there. It's a very interesting mission. You have a lot of time with your thoughts, and you just do the nation's business.
That is awesome. Just before the show started, we were talking, and it's kind of cool. What Chris, what you fly, and Shasta, what you fly, very, very different, but there are a lot of similarities between those flights, and we'll get into those here in just a minute. I want to give some shout outs. We've got Fort Worth, Texas, Sturbridge, Massachusetts, my hometown of Kansas City, Missouri, checking in, Mexico, Great Barrington Airport, Baltimore, Houston, Louisiana, Clear Lake, Iowa, Maryland, California, and Virginia all checking in. Thank you all for tuning in and watching. Please let us know what questions you have down in the comments section. We would love to hear those questions, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can get to. We've got a question coming in. Somebody wants to know about flight school and what you need to do to get into flight school. So I want to ask that to both of you, but also, how did you get into flying? Shasta, let's start with you.
Well, actually, I have a very untraditional story of how I got into aviation. So my family, they came to America from Afghanistan as refugees when I was barely a year old. English is my third language. I grew up in a very challenged school district where my school didn't have a lot of supplies or funding. And with my traditional Afghani heritage, I kind of grew up thinking, okay, well, I'm going to follow the footsteps of my mom and her mother and generations before them and just, get married and become a housewife. And it wasn't until I was 17 years old where I was a passenger on Delta Airlines in the back seat, terrified. I grew up terrified of flying. I was terrified in my seat, and I'm thinking, my God, this plane's probably going to launch into the sky like a rocket, and it's going to be like this big roller coaster. But to my surprise, when that jetliner took off, it was as if, like, in that moment, I had this sense of purpose, and I wanted to not get off the airplane and not leave the airport and figure out, how can I become a pilot? And so, what I did is, for the first 2 years, I went to my nearby community college where I got my associate's degree. And throughout those 2 years, I applied to every scholarship you could imagine, because my parents had 6 girls. We didn't have a lot of income to spend money on flight training, so it was a lot of scholarship writing. And then after 2 years, I applied to a university called Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach, Florida. I got accepted and I finished my bachelor's degree there, and then I went on to do a master's degree. So there are plenty of schools out there. Embry-Riddle is definitely one of the biggest flight schools in the United States. They have 2 campuses, one in Florida, one in Arizona. But more and more, if you go down to your local airport and you knock on some doors and say, hey, I want to become a pilot, there are so many flight schools all over the United States. It's become very accessible. And I know that finances can be a challenge for some, and there are scholarships from AOPA, Women in Aviation, EAA. So there's money out there. And all you really have to do is get into your car, go to the nearby airport, and just tell people, this is my passion. I want to learn how to fly. And you'd be surprised as to how many people will want to help you.
Awesome. Chris, how did you get into flying?
A little bit different. I'm originally from New Orleans, Louisiana. So down in New Orleans, going through junior high school, the big culture for high school kids was marching in Mardi Gras parades, playing in the band, or that was just the big thing. And going from junior high to high school, that is what I was going to do. I was going to join the band. I was going to play trombone and figure out what I was going to do later in life. And my grandfather also drove trucks, so I was like, well, truck driving is cool. I'll do that, And true story, I am walking across the floor for orientation towards the band table. I looked to the right and I saw an F-16 fighter jet on a poster. I turned left. I joined ROTC, Reserve Officers Training Corps for Air Force, and I never looked back. I said I was going to fly. Fast forward time a little bit. I went to the local airport and took a discovery flight. Went out, and the instructor showed me, turns and climbs and all of that stuff, and I was bitten by the bug and never looked back. I said I was going to fly. I eventually went to Louisiana Tech University, where I majored in professional aviation. Got a commission because I was in Air Force ROTC to go to the Air Force, and I commissioned as a navigator. But eventually, I applied to pilot training and went through undergraduate pilot training with the Air Force, where I was a C-130 pilot at first, and then later I joined Air Force Special Operations and a lot of little weird little airplanes. One of my favorite is M28 Skytruck, but another story. And then I applied to the U2 program and was selected and hired as a U2 pilot. And other organizations. So I'm a civilian pilot and a military pilot, and participate in programs programs. Shasta mentioned the different programs, but I do mention programs. I'm a member of a Legacy Flight Academy, where we mentor students and offer free flights and free solo flights, free solo training to students with different programs throughout the year. I'm also a member of Black Pilots of America, where we do the same thing, mentoring students and youth in careers in aviation and STEM fields. So a little bit different route, but I got to flying and flying ever since.
That's awesome. And the museum hosts a She Can camp for students to learn all about flying. And those students actually get to go up in small airplanes and take those discovery flights and take the controls. And my co-host Beth, she got an opportunity to fly in one of those. I don't think the bug bit her like it did you all on that flight, but it's really kind of awesome to go out to the airport and see these young students getting in airplanes and taking off and flying. We've got some more shout outs here. We've got Ella, who's in 6th grade, who wants to be a Thunderbird pilot in the Air Force, and then an astronaut, and then President of the United States. So Ella, awesome. I love it. We've got Yorktown, Haymarket, Alabama, Swindon, England, Roseburg, Oregon, Grand Rapids, Michigan. Belgium is tuning in, as well as Indianapolis, Indiana. Thank you all for watching. And remember, please put your questions down into the comments section. We'd love to hear what you want to know about piloting, or about Shaesta or Chris's path to what they're currently doing. Let's see. Somebody wants to know what challenges you all had to overcome to become pilots. Shasta, you want to take that one?
Sure. So, being a woman in aviation, we are the minority. And so, especially when I told people that I wanted to fly around the world, I got comments like, oh, sweetie, why don't you do the right thing and take a man with you? And I thought, well, what is a man going to do? I'm very capable. And also too, like sometimes when I would get in front of people and I would, be so passionate and I'd share my dreams, I would get reactions like cute, or, oh, that's really scary. And I think part of flying around the world, aside from the weight restrictions, I really couldn't carry another person with me. This, like another personal purpose behind the global flight was to say, us women, we are capable of getting into airplanes and flying that aircraft. So I think for me, it was a big gender. It wasn't so much when I wanted to become a pilot. It was when I wanted to fly around the world that I got a lot of pushback from certain individuals. But also too, I think just with my background, being confident, every time I get into that cockpit during flight training, I always thought like, maybe I'm just not smart enough or capable enough, or, like doubting myself. And really, you just have to own it. You have to own up to being the pilot in command and have the confidence. And so I think those were two things that I really struggled with my career track.
Chris, did you have any obstacles that you had to overcome?
Absolutely, several. I'd say the very first is probably the knowledge, just knowledge of flying, knowledge of how to get into it, people to talk to about flying. I share being a minority in aviation with Shasta, obviously, and just where I grew up in the community. I would catch the local city bus to go to school almost every day. I would pass an airport, Lakefront Airport, and it never registered to me. It just wasn't a thing. So knowledge first, just of how to get involved. The second one would probably be resources. Inner city kid all my life. I've lived in the city, and again, minority in the city. Resources. That it's a challenge out there. And then lastly, I keep hitting on it, but being a minority. All right. So regardless of whether it was in college or especially in the Air Force, being one of a class of 10, 12, later on 15, 20, it gets very, very lonely sometimes. And just looking for common bonds with people. And then kind of touchy, but just culture differences. Just trying to make your way through programs when you're the only one, it's kind of tough, and it takes a lot of confidence, self-confidence, to be able to keep pushing through that. In the Air Force, we are a very, very minority pilots, specifically African American pilots. We are a very, very, very small percentage, and specifically in the U2 community, of I think we're on solo number maybe 1059, maybe 1060. And what that means is there's only been 1060 or so people in the program. Of that number, I am African American U2 pilot number 8. We're on number 9 now, but I am number 8 since 1955. So it's a very, very small community, and just dealing with being the minority is just tough sometimes. It really is. So you just have to figure out a way to push yourself forward and look for any resources, any help, because it's a challenge. It really is.
Well, I've gotten a chance to meet both of you over the last couple of years, and just getting a chance to meet both of you and hear your stories is truly inspirational. Both of you guys coming from very different backgrounds, but really, truly doing some amazing things. And I think you're inspiring another generation today talking to us. So thank you guys both. Shaesta, I think I cut you off.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add something about the minority piece. For those out there who think, there are not a lot of pilots out there that look like me or that talk like me, whatever it is, I want to just share that when you get into that airplane, it doesn't matter what color skin you have, what religion you come from, what part of the world you come from, where you are, like nothing really matters. The only thing that matters is your ability as a pilot to fly that aircraft. So again, you could be a boy, a girl, you could be from any part of the world, because I know, yes, there is a push for, more of a diverse industry, but also looking at from the other end of that diverse crowd that's out there that may have an interest in aviation, that might think, I don't see a lot of people here who look like me. Just remember that that aircraft responds based on your knowledge as a pilot. And if you can put yourself through flight training and learn everything to become the best pilot that you can be, that's the only thing that matters when you're in that aircraft.
Can I just say one more thing to add on to that? I completely 100% agree. Aviation, we pilots, we have these personalities, these type A personalities, where we often share stories and compete a lot. But I can tell you, at the end of the day, regardless of how you sound on the ground, when you get in that airplane, it's your hands that make a difference. Your hands and that ability to be a pilot that makes a difference, period. And this is I think this is one of the few industries where that rings true regardless.
Very true.
Awesome. Well, if you're tuning in, make sure you put your questions down in the comments section. We've got a lot of questions coming in. Chris, somebody wants to know, what's the hardest part about flying the U2?
Hardest part about flying the U2 is landing the plane. Absolutely landing the plane. So it is the toughest airplane in the world to land. Number one, because of how we land. When we take off, we have small wheels under the wing we call pogo wheels, or pogos. When we take off, those wheels fall out. So when we land, it's actually like landing a bicycle, where I have a main wheel and a tail wheel. So not only do I have to manage the wind, manage the crab or the angle at which I land, but it's a very, very, very efficient glider. So essentially, I have to stall or run out of energy, basically fall out of the sky to land the airplane. And so I get down to 2 feet, and I just basically hold it there until the airplane basically runs out of energy and says, "Okay, I'm done flying," and it just drops from the ground. It's a very heavy airplane. And after 8 to 11 hours in the sky, you come back tired. You can have bad weather conditions. You're on your own, and I'm wearing a spacesuit, so it makes it kind of tough. It's a very tough airplane to land, without a doubt.
Now, you mentioned the length of your flight, and Shaesta, tell us about the longest stretch that you went on your around the world flight, and how did you handle that?
You know, what's so interesting is Chris's biggest challenge is landing. And for me, it was the overweight takeoffs. So in order to fly my longest distance, which was 14 and a half hours, mind you, this is a Beechcraft Bonanza. It's a small single engine airplane that typically on a good day would travel 600 nautical miles. For me, it was a little over 2,000 nautical miles of a leg from Honolulu to Hayward, California. And for me, I remember getting to that very, very, very like beginning of the runway and just pressing my feet on the brakes, giving it all the power, saying all the prayers that I knew, and just praying that this plane, the wheels aren't going to pop, like it's going to start rolling. I'm going to build airspeed. It's going to lift off. So that was probably the most challenging, is just taking off overweight, and you really have to nurse the plane. I mean, at one point I was climbing 50 feet per minute, like barely in the sky, hanging on. But the longest leg was 14 and a half hours. And to be very honest, I wasn't so afraid of the Pacific Ocean. Again, 14 and a half hours. My biggest fear was the Atlantic Ocean, because I didn't have any de-icing equipment on board. I didn't have any weather radar. And Mother Nature up in the north might not be so forgiving. So, you know, I was terrified. I kept thinking, if I, God forbid, impact the water, even with my immersion suit on, I might have 10, 15 minutes before hypothermia kicks in. So yeah, lots of challenges, but you know, it's aviation. You kind of go into it knowing that anything can happen at any moment, and you trust your aircraft, you trust your engine, you trust your instruments, and you just keep going.
I love seeing you two react to each other as you're talking, because, you know, Shaesta, while you're talking, Chris is like, yep, that's a thing.
I know,
yep.
But what Chris does is way cooler than what I do. I feel like I can't really even compare the two, but yeah.
Now, Chris, what's your longest
similarities?
What's the average flight for you?
So average flight is anywhere between 8 and 11 hours, depending on the mission. And sometimes I could be talking to someone, sometimes not, just kind of out alone and unafraid, as you will, on a mission. What I find interesting about those long missions, and Shasta, is actually a question I have for you. So you kind of figure out things to do in the cockpit. Looking out the window, counting clouds, or, you know, for us, eating is a challenge for us sometimes. But those long legs, you have a lot of time to think, read books, and monitor systems, but look out the window. I'd like to ask Shasta, though, on your longest leg, what was your favorite or go-to thing to do while you were just sitting there cruising?
Oh man, you know, if I had this crazy chart where, just to keep my mind awake and stay alert, I would write down everything, my fuel flow, the RPM, I mean, you name it, every data that I could collect. And it was just more for me to like make sure this one engine that I have is running and it's running well. But honestly, it was music. I had my Bose A20 on, and I'm not a big Kanye West fan, but I learned that the song Runaway, the beat was like the perfect beat to to scan your instruments. It was like ding, ding, you know, it was just like, and it's a really long song. So I would listen to that song over and over and over, and I just keep my scan up with my instruments. And then I'm a big foodie. I feel like all I did was just eat. And there were times where I'm like, you know, I shouldn't be eating so much in the plane, because if I start choking, you know what then? But yeah, I'm a big foodie. I always had snacks on board. But to be very honest with you, I didn't do a lot of looking outside because I made that mistake of doing that, and it psyched me out. And I thought like, wow, I'm really over the ocean by myself, far away from land. So let me just look inside and just keep going. So
that's interesting. A few years ago, they had lowered the Spirit of St. Louis in the museum downtown. And so we were able to go up and actually look into the cockpit. And one of the things that you can still see in the cockpit are his handwritten pencil marks from when he would switch fuel tanks, and he would mark those not only to keep track, but also to help him stay awake, to make those marks. And so it's interesting to hear what you both have done on that. All right, we've got a lot of questions coming in. Please keep putting those questions down in the comments section. We've got a few minutes left, and we want to make sure we get to as many of them as we can. Chris, somebody wants to know what the Terminator line is.
The Terminator Line. Okay, so the best way to describe the Terminator Line is if you ever see pictures from space that the astronauts take, and you can see the Earth where you can see part of it is dark, and then the other side is light. Well, that line is the Terminator Line. And what's interesting is I actually see that line. If I'm flying a day to a night mission, I can actually see the darkness coming across the planet, and you can actually get on that line. And I have a photo. I'm not sure if I gave you guys that photo, but I have a photo where I'm on that line, where on my helmet you can see one side is nighttime and the other side is daytime, and you can clearly see it across the sky. So it's pretty cool to see that.
So Chris, actually, I have a question for you, if you don't mind, since we're on the subject of nicknames. So I recently read The Sled Driver about the SR-71 aircraft, and I get why they call it the Sled Driver, but I read that the U-2 is nicknamed Dragon Lady. Is there a significance to that?
Well, we like to say there's a duality with Dragon Lady. There are days, regardless of the conditions, there are days you can go out and fly the airplane, and it's just like dancing with a lady, and it's smooth and it's beautiful, and there's no turbulence, there's no bounce. I mean, it's just amazing. It's just like riding on glass, and you come back and land and put it down tail first, and it's awesome. And that is the lady part of it. But it doesn't matter what level of experience you have with this aircraft. And we have some pretty experienced guys with the airplane still around. You can go out and this airplane will rear its nasty head, and that dragon will bite you in a heartbeat. So, I flew yesterday, and it was pretty nice. I'm supposed to fly on tomorrow, and you just never know. Some days you just wrestle with the airplane. You can pat it on the nose all you want and baby her all you want, but there are some days where she just wants to bite you. Yeah, it can be tough.
Wow. That's awesome. Shaesta, somebody wants to know if you had any weird experiences with air traffic control when you were flying around the world.
I did. So on my leg from, okay, let me think about this. Okay, Egypt to Bahrain. So this is the Middle East. I was over nothing but sand, and I had never seen the desert before. So there I am at 8,000 feet, and I'm like, what? So much sand. And I'm flying along, and I get into the Saudi airspace, Saudi Arabia. And I did my radio calls. I did all of like what you typically do in case of a radio failure. And I think I never got a response back. And I think it was just very odd for a woman to be speaking in that airspace. And so it was a bit frustrating because there was an aircraft that was doing landings at a nearby airport. And I kept asking, like what exactly. They were very vague about their location, and it seemed like the location that they were giving was locations that if you were flying in that airspace, you would know. But I kept asking for their location again, no answer. I could hear them, and I know my radios were working. So that was probably the toughest. But I do have to say, when I flew into Egypt, as soon as I got into the Egyptian airspace, every controller that I spoke to was a woman, and they all when they answered me, they had a very it was as if they were smiling. Like you can hear people smile over the radio. And I got to the airport, and they had cleared off the center runway for me. It was just mine, clear to land. Wow. I got the clearance way out. I mean, again, I'm in a slow airplane, and there's all these jets landing, Emirates and Egypt Air. And once I landed, I later on found out that air traffic control had coordinated for there to be a woman for every controller, just to say welcome, feel comfortable. So yeah, really interesting experiences all over the world with air traffic.
That's awesome.
Oh, sorry. I'm
No,
just
go for
getting
it.
ahead of myself. No. I feel like I've talked too much already about this question. Go on.
Chris, tell us a little bit about your crew when you're flying. You're flying solo, but how many people does it take to get that plane up into the air and support you while you're on a flight?
It's a massive effort, and it's not just me. So just with the air crew itself, there's two of us. So I'm in the aircraft, but I also have a qualified U2 pilot that's in a chase car, because the chase car assists me on the ground with the ground handling and returning back on landing. Because like I said, when I land, um, I need to get it down to 2 feet, and he's usually talking on the radios because I can't see out with the pressure suit on. It's very limited visibility. But beyond we two, the effort starts way before I even get to the airplane. So there's obviously the intel professionals, the intelligence professionals. Um, Once we get that picture and we know what it is that I'm going to do, then the big machine goes into motion. So we have all the medics, the flight docs that I need to go see that make sure that I'm physically good to go fly and operate at those altitudes and within the pressure suit. For the pressure suit itself, the physiological support division, the people that maintain the suit, that I mean, it's just a massive amount of those folks that their sole job is to keep me alive. And then all the maintenance professionals out on the airplane. This is essentially a 50-year-old airplane. Now it's been updated, and our models are a little bit newer, but it's essentially the same airplane. All cables and pulleys. It's a very manual airplane, so it takes a lot of maintenance to maintain the airplane. And then for every sensor that we have on the airplane, there are civilian contractors that maintain those sensors. When I'm actually flying, if I'm flying a mission where I'm communicating with somebody, there's actually a full blown building of people that I'm talking to, or I'm talking to other aircraft, or I'm on a mission by myself. And when I get back, there's a huge amount of people that deal with what I went out to do when I get back. So the effort for me when I go fly, it's massive just for one guy and one mission. When you step to the airplane and I get to go fly, we have a tradition. You rub the nose. All the maintainers line up. They salute. You salute them and shake everyone's hand. On a training mission, it's maybe 4 or 5 out at the airplane. On a live mission, it could be upwards of 40 people out there. So you just kind of go through and give them high fives, because getting up to the airplane, you're just kind of tired after walking in the suit out there. So it's a massive effort. It's not just the pilot by no means.
And Shaesta, how many people supported your flight?
Oh, wow. It really was a global effort. But from the standpoint of the nonprofit Dreams Soar, when I took off, we had a board of directors, we had an advisory council from people all over the world that would give feedback for the different regions that I was flying into. And what was really special is we had what we called the Dream Team, which were college students who were part of the planning and the preparation of the global flight. So in all, I mean, it was like anywhere between 20 to 30 really dedicated people who were just on standby. And this was for 145 days. So it wasn't like, you come back the next day or in a couple of hours. So there were a lot of hands on deck. And another thing too is a lot of the civil aviation authorities around the world had coordinated my arrival and the outreach events. So it was very dynamic. There were a lot of people involved, a lot of partners, a lot of people, a lot of donors. So it was incredible. It's incredible, really.
Cool. And Chris, we're getting several questions coming in, and you mentioned this a little bit, but I want you to go into this a little bit more. Talk to us about the car that helps you land.
We use Dodge Chargers, and basically the chase car, or the mobile, we call him, as I'm approaching the runway, I'll start talking to him a little bit further out, but as I'm approaching the runway, he'll basically chase to get in a position direct center and behind the airplane, no closer than about 25 feet or so. And what he's doing is he's giving me an altitude countdown down to 2 feet. He's helping me with the crab of the airplane or any odd or weird things that's going on with the airplane, talking me down. And it would sound like, there's 10, 8, 6, 5, 4. Little left rudder, little right rudder. I mean, he's basically coaching because again, the visibility is such that it's hard to see the ground. I can't tell where 2 feet is unless you start to develop that picture out. But it's hard to, especially as a new guy, you can't find 2 feet. You're all over the place. And the issue with that, with the chase car is, he wants you down at about 2 feet because if you stall or run out of energy at 2 feet, the airplane just drops. But if I'm anywhere above, 4 to 5 feet, I risk damaging the airplane. I risk damaging a sensor or something like that. So it's a very tough job. Not only is he there to assist me in landing, he is also my on-the-ground wingman. He is also my on-the-ground safety observer. Because in the suit, specifically taxiing, she doesn't taxi very well. It's a beast on the ground. And there's a lot I can't see, especially with the sensor jet. There's a lot I can't see, specifically with maintenance professionals and whatnot running around the aircraft. So clearing for that, if there's some sort of emergency, he will assist me with the emergency running checklist and things like that. So it's a very important job in the mobile, and you're a qualified YouTube pilot, so you know exactly what's going on with the pilot in the aircraft.
So are you in the car sometimes?
Yes, we do both. So you'll either fly or you'll mobile. We'll do both.
That's awesome. Okay, you mentioned this a little bit, Chris, but Shaesta, I want you to talk about, somebody asked, do you all have rituals that you do before you get into the plane or before you fly?
That's a good question. So every morning I'd have to wake up before the sun would rise, and I'd have to depart right at sunset. So it was just a lot of coffee, a lot of running through the takeoff, the climb, and all of that. Normally for me, it was coffee and music just to calm me down. Because once I'd get to the airport, it would be a mad rush. But I don't have anything specific that I would do every flight. I wish I did, but I didn't have that.
Chris, how about you, other than the high fives and the handshakes?
I do. So when we show the flight, well, for one, it starts the day prior for us because we have to watch our diet. No bathroom up there, so we have to watch our diet with what we eat. So you eat properly, get a good night's sleep. But for me, when I'm going to get dressed, we usually have to pre-breathe, 100% oxygen. So I will sit there and sleep for about 15 to 20 minutes. I get me a good nap, and then they wake me up. It's time to go to the airplane. Like I say, you rub the airplane's nose, you shake and salute hands, then hop in and get going. But that 20-minute nap for me, 15 to 20-minute nap, it's amazing.
Nice.
Maybe that's what I need to start doing before these shows. Just, hey, I got to take a 15-minute nap. I'll be right back.
Right.
I love that. A couple of folks are asking about when you're up in the air, what's your favorite thing that you've seen? Shaesta?
Usually the sunsets. I mean, it's the sky are these shades of colors that I really can't find on the ground. And especially after a thunderstorm, the sky is just lit up, and it's just breathtaking. And I sit there and I tell myself, this is why I fly. It's this scenic beauty in front of me that just makes you feel so alive and so free.
Chris, how about you?
Yeah. There are so many things, so many things. As an aviation enthusiast, it's always really interesting as I'm flying, if I'm flying over the States specifically, to look down and see an airliner, as small, as it would look as if I'm on the ground, right? So that's number one. Number two, I don't know if this is going to be controversial or not, but seeing the curvature of the Earth.
Wow.
It's curved, and it's not the helmet or the windscreen. It's curved. And then as you get higher, the sky gets darker. It gets real dark. The Terminator Line. My longest flight, bringing an airplane home, I actually took off when the sun was up. The sun went down, and then the sun rose again before I got to my destination. So that was pretty cool. And you can see that a long way. So just the things that you can see while you're up there.
Chris, are you high enough to be considered an astronaut?
No, no, not high enough to be an astronaut. I wish. Working on that one.
We've had a couple of folks write in, both of you, the flights that you've done, there are dangers associated with it. How do you handle that fear, or is there fear?
Definitely, there is fear. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all human. And especially when you go out on your own and place parts of the world that you've never been to and you don't know what to expect. And for me, I just had so much confidence in my aircraft and my one engine. I knew it like the back of my hand. And I know that this might sound strange, but um, I really had to become a one with the airplane. It's like the smallest sound, you know exactly what's going on, and you're like, okay, something is not right. And I did have kind of a scare over the Atlantic Ocean with my HF antenna, which snapped off the plane and it was dangling from the tail of my aircraft. And it was even surprising for me because it's like you learn to aviate, navigate, communicate, to fly that plane no matter what. And you read so much about it, but when you're in that moment, it's like like later thinking back, you're like, wow, I did that. But yeah, something happens, your brain shuts off all emotions and you just react. And that's really what I did. So fear is important because it keeps you on your toes. It keeps you really a brave, a sharp pilot. And so it's essential. But also fear is real. And there were nights where I would wake up and I would think, man, I don't know about this next flight. But then you just kind of think about why you're doing it and you get your energy and your mojo back. So yeah.
Chris, how about you?
The one thing that sticks out for the U2 pilot, we have all the associated fears with just flying the airplane, mechanical malfunctions with the airplane if we have those, weather and things like that. But one thing that sticks out for us is we are operating in an area where humans don't operate, hence the spacesuit. So everything that's associated with flying in that spacesuit, the heat from the sun, the temperatures. My most challenging emergency, I lost all heat in the airplane. And you would think, oh, that's not so bad until you realize that outside the air is negative 70 degrees. And it can take quite a while for me to get down or quite a while for me to get home. And I can tell you it was negative 16 in my cockpit. I was slowly starting to experience some hypothermia, losing, I couldn't feel my fingers, couldn't feel my feet. But the aviate part, I've got to get it back or I've got to get out. So you think about that. The navigate, got to figure out how to get home, and as I'm dealing with the environment, and then just communicating when I can get back, but still got to bring the airplane back home. So the environment for us sometimes can be a scary beast.
Wow. Now, we're just about out of time. We've got a lot of young folks that are watching today. And Shaesta, somebody commented that they wanted you to talk a little bit about some scholarships that you all have available. But I want you to just kind of, both of you, talk about, for that young person watching that wants to follow in your all's footsteps, what advice do you have for them?
So as far as the scholarship goes, Dreams Soar recently awarded our first scholarship really right before everything hit with COVID-19. It was in January of this year at the NBAA Regional Forum. We awarded it to a young female aviator who was studying at Embry-Riddle. And our hopes is to offer more scholarships in the future, but we had just offered that one. But I have to say, women in aviation, all of the organizations out there that support aviation, NBAA, EAA, I mean, they all have scholarship opportunities. And Also, too, build a network, start talking to people, make contacts, because if someone really believes in you, they will invest in your future. And you never know who knows somebody who has a contact at a organization that gives out scholarships. So, put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to share your struggles, because aviation is very expensive and not everyone can afford it. So, definitely put it out there. And my advice for that young aviator, especially with things that are happening right now with COVID-19 and the airlines and the aviation industry is taking a hit. Don't let this pandemic scare you. If you have a passion, you will find your purpose. And aviation is something that is so essential to humanity that it's not going to go anywhere. And to have faith in this industry, to have faith in yourself, and to keep pressing forward, and don't let anything hold you back, not where you're from, your financial situation. If you believe in yourself and your passion for aviation, just go proceed forward, soar forward, and you will find your place within this industry.
Chris?
So number one, I would say for especially the younger kids, listen to your parents. Listen to your parents, learn to follow directions, learn to follow instructions, learn to do what's right, continue to learn your schoolwork. That's first. And then for me personally, I would say dream. Don't ever stop dreaming. Right. And here's where I'm going to lead you with that. Turn those dreams that you have into goals. Right. So turn those dreams into goals, and then turn those goals into achievements. When you do that, start the whole process over. Just keep doing that over and over and over again, and you will get anything you want. Aviation, space, beyond space, whatever you can dream of, you can create it. So that for those. Now, with regard, you asked Shasta about scholarships and different organizations. I want to highlight one of the organizations that I am in. That's Legacy Flight Academy. We are starting to get into looking at scholarships. However, what we do with Legacy Flight Academy is we go out to states, to different cities, mentoring kids, and we do specific programs called Eyes Above the Horizon. And what these programs are is usually a day program where we set up at an airport and we fly kids for free. On several occasions, we've flown 85 kids a day, 100 kids a day, all free to kids, and it's just to share the knowledge of aviation. Share the experiences, and that one kid, Chris Duckett, that's out there that didn't know anything about it, goes up and takes that flight, and it can stick with them, and more than likely will stick with them forever. You will never forget that experience, whether it's a good one, hopefully, or a terrifying one. You will never forget that experience, and that could lead you a very, very long way. We do have programs that we're still doing with COVID, so please look for Legacy Flight Academy, and hopefully we will be in your neck of the woods real soon, because we have a program that's right around the corner where we plan to take more kids across the nation up flying.
Wow, that is awesome. You two are both so inspirational, and I appreciate you joining us today. We thank everybody that tuned in and asked some really great questions today. We hope you tune in next week. We have another live chat on Thursday next week on facing challenges, and we will have pilot Tammy Jo Schultz joining us for that one. So we encourage you to tune in there. Chris and Shasta, thank you all so much for joining us today. It's been a great conversation, and for everybody watching, thanks for watching.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.